metaphor for just sort of like the world that we live in, or like land, or right. So this like generic idea of like this place where everything happens. And then I thought, well, maybe a carpenter's square would be better, because like a carpenter's square, like it goes across. So like, well, we still like measure stuff and try to figure it out or sort it out in some way. But then it's also like has this vertical component. So maybe it's a piece of land, but then also a tree. And certainly like the world we live in is multidimensional. So so this has at least two. So I suggest that. So then I thought maybe a compass, a geometry compass, could represent probably the sun or maybe the moon, but to really make this a sort of landscape. Well, for one, it makes circles, but then like it could also sort of describe like the land sort of circumscribing the sun as well. So I put those together, and then of course like the person who's roaming around in this place like has to be your pencil, right? Because, well, there's like a certain agency involved, and well, probably like maybe the pencil can't do anything unless it's like stays directly along the line of the ruler, or like the exact circumference of the compass. But either way, so that was the person. But then like the whole idea sort of seemed really familiar to me. And I realized the square and the compass, it's part of Freemasonry. Well, it's the most recognizable symbol of Freemasonry, which I really know nothing about. So that's probably not like the best reference for me to make. So it would be hard for me to tell you what the square and the compass represent to Freemasons, but I guess like the idea is there's the G it like probably stands for the great architect, or maybe God. So there's that. They don't have a pencil; they have the great architect. But even still, like still thinking of my version of it, it didn't completely make sense, because well, it's like one ruler or one carpenter square, so there's just one land. And then one compass, and then just like one pencil. Like it all seems really lonely. So this is a picture of a sunset in Tucson. This is where I grew up. And so like I thought, well, maybe like this makes a little bit more sense. So now there's like the two like sort of hills coming together, and there's still only one sun. But there's a lot more pencils, so like it's not as lonely, and I think this like feels a little bit better. This idea of kind of like people's interaction with the land is mostly what I'm gonna talk about, and I guess. I've mostly thought of my work being the complete opposite of sort of landscape painting, but really like I'm just going to talk about landscape stuff, because I actually think it makes sense. And I think part of it is maybe like this idea of an alternative landscape. Like one thing that I've thought of is generally there's this well-defined horizon. So like this place, there's like here and there's there, and like maybe you want to go there, but like you know where it is, and there's sort of like this angle. But I think there's other ideas that sometimes make more sense, which and something that I'll get to a little bit later is maybe a landscape or a horizon it's like more of just like this atmosphere. So there's no actual line. There's like no visual. You're not convinced where it ends, or sort of the opposite. So that's like that's like the version that's like ever expansive. And then there's also this like micro version that that proceeds so much that it's actually like confined on all sides. So it's more actually a landscape. This is a piece that, that I showed last summer. This is called Play Your Pieces for a Future Game. And it is that idea that this whiteboard is the field where everything happens. And so this is like the measured land. It's a 4 by 8 foot piece of plywood. And Play Your Pieces in the sense of like a Monopoly game, right? You have the iron and the top hat and the log. And so these are all versions of that they've like taken into account a sense of materiality. And like hopefully like a sense of sort of like politics and hierarchy and well, this first piece has a lot to do with my house. So this piece of concrete was in my backyard and somebody poured it to put trash cans on. And I didn't want to put trash cans on it anymore, so I took it out. And I just had it sitting around, and then I decided to use it for this. And so it represents this foundation. And when you build a house, you have to have a level foundation. And so I cast these shims out of dirt. So this is dirt from my backyard. To try to level out like where like this idea of like this house is going to be. And then so you have to have a level to make sure that it's flat. And so I made this just with a bottle that I had drank out of. And what it's sitting on is a piece of rubber, and that's cast based on the footprint of my house. So I live in a row house, and so it's basically just a long, skinny rectangle. And then I just kind of elevated it to make it more of a plateau. And so this, like all these things come together, like to just like in the most basic way. It's like just like water and like everyday activities, and just like trying to like level out all of that in a really simple way. Is something I was thinking about. This is another piece that's like right next to it. So this wrapper that you see is actually stuck in the concrete, and both of these are pieces of lead. At the time, I was working in a foundry, and someone brought in like this statue of a woman that had been cast in lead and needed to be repaired. So we took it apart and repaired it, and these little pieces fell out. And I thought, well, it's probably they're probably just junk, right? Not only junk, but they're like toxic. But it was also sort of like one sculpture giving birth to another sculpture. So I saved them, and I made these sand bases for them. And then there's also sort of like this idea of like possibly male and female reproduction, and so those are a pair. These three pieces are, in a sense, modern day arrowheads. So this is just a piece of mica. This is a piece of steel I found on the street. This is a piece of slag, which is impurities that you would scrape off with molten bronze. And so it's mostly sand, but like you have to get, if you're gonna cast bronze, you have to get it out. And so there's sort of like arrowhead remnants from an industrialized culture, and so they don't like any arrowhead. It doesn't really necessarily look violent, right, when it's just laying on the ground. But there are like aspects of our industrialized culture that are really violent. And whether it's violent to people or violent to the environment. So it's just they're different forms of arrowheads. This piece has to do with fracking. So this is turning water into natural gas into wine. So this is, I'm not sure what this stone is on top. Maybe it might be a piece of shale. So that's sitting on top of this cast sand. And then water, which probably most people know, like turns water into natural gas, and then there's like huge profits, right? So then like we can live this like luxurious lifestyle. These two pieces are also slag, and they look sort of like wine, so I just kind of set it up that way. This piece is there's a few of these pieces that I sort of feel like represent sort of pathways, like ways to get from one place to another, and so this is a smooth pathway, and it's just a piece of steel kind of made into a plateau on top of this cast dirt. This is a piece of bronze, and this is represents us sort of like separating bronze, like a precious metal, out of the earth, and it creates this sense of hierarchy, and so the separation is represented by the glass tube. And then this is another pathway, but this is a rough surface, like between here and there. And so this is bronze that's collected on a round steel rod that people would like plasma cut on top of. So it's just like little specks of bronze that's just built on top of each other, and that's on wax. These two pieces are, so the bottoms of them are rubber, and the idea is that they're both on rubber bases, but they represent, which could be a round world on the left and a flat world on the right. And like we have the ability to kind of see the world in both ways. And like people do, right? But so I don't know. I think there's something important about having like a flexible basis for like all of our beliefs or ideas. And then finally, this is a bronze balloon, and it's hung up with a cable, and then it's got this string, which is snap line. So it's like when you do construction, you use it to make a straight line across the floor. And so that's the whole piece. And so I guess like when it's all together, I can sort of see this bronze balloon as being a sun or a moon, and then this is like the land and the place where everything takes place. If you're going, so this balloon I didn't polish very much, but if you really wanted to have a shiny balloon, so you would sand it a bunch, and then you would use Scotch-Brite to polish it up even more, and then you would use a polishing compound with like a little rag. So in the process of doing that, like these. I incidentally made these little designs on paper towel. So the peach color is the polishing compound, which is called luminol, and the green is oxidized bronze dust. And I thought they were cool. And so there's a few of them, so I saved them. So these were originally titled Unknown Patterns, which was kind of like the working title for the show at Cynthia Jacob, and then became the title of a lot of other pieces that were made. And like part of the idea is right, things that happen incidentally, or there's like chance involved, and let's see how much time I have. Okay, I'm gonna not talk about that right now, but I'll get back. I'll show a few more images of these other sort of drawings that go by the same title. So I also just like the materialist would just be like paper towel, luminol, and bronze, and they're also just like kind of trash. So speaking of trash. This is the alley behind my house, And so on the right is some stuff that my neighbor put behind his house like 6 months ago. And he hasn't cleaned it up yet. And so there's a show that in a bank downtown that the Contemporary Museum put on, and for one of the pieces I took some of the wood from my neighbors, and I didn't ask, so hope they were fine with it. And then these are neighbors that live in an adjacent alley, and so that kind of pile on the right, like I took some of their stuff as well. And then this is under 83 at Clifford Mill Road and Ash Street, so it's in Hammond. And I took a bunch of wood from here. And then I set this stuff up in my backyard and took this table saw and cut everything down to 8.5 by 11. So these are the pieces. So these are all 11-inch strips. So it was all really dirty wood and warped. The idea was to go from something like, this is complete chaos, right, and like completely useless. And then to make it something that has like a certain proportion to us, it's like a certain ergonomics, and like we can classify it in a way that makes sense. So taking complete chaos and pushing it more towards organization. And so all these 8.5 by 11s went on this bookcase. And the bookcase is like actually nearly full when it's all on there. So I put it on there and kind of kept them in categories, like all this stuff on the top came from under the bridge at 83. And then like the stuff on the bottom was from my neighbor's house, and then there was a bunch of plexiglass that came from somewhere else. And it was like it was really rad. It was really cool, but it was also kind of boring. So I set it up like this. And so this sort of gets back to this idea of maybe like an alternative landscape. So the piece on the left is sort of like the most generic sunset that I can make in 5 minutes on Photoshop. And the piece on the right is just completely generic dusk. And then it just so happened that these pieces of wood that I cut up, all from under the 83 overpass, kind of resembled some of the colors. So this piece in the front is actually had a bullseye spray painted on it, and then somebody shot a bunch of holes in it. And so the idea is this, in a sense, represents a different version of like day and night, or sunset and dusk. So it's called Day and Night under 83, which is just like a materialized classified sort of like ergonomic story. You know, instead of someone just telling you or showing you a picture of what sunset is like under 83. This is a dumpster in the Mill Industrial Park, and pulled a bunch of plexiglass out of it, and then set it up under these windows. And so this is just called yellowed windows, because I assume that's probably exactly what this was and exactly why they took it out. So it just got all chopped up, and now it's under these other windows that are actually like really nice and clear. Part of that same show, so the way I began these pieces was kind of the opposite. So the last one was like taking materials that were completely chaotic and making it more classified or organized. And this is the idea of taking a circle and trying to make it irregular on purpose. So this piece is made out of wax paper and foil tape. And then made a big sheet of it, drilled a hole in the middle of it, and used my body as a compass, as a geometric compass to make a circle. So for this one, I put my forehead on the nail right in the middle, and then stretched my left arm out as far as I could, and just like awkwardly push myself around on the paper, drawing a line, and then cut it out. And then this is the same thing, but I put my forehead in the middle and use my right arm. And then this one, so this is just foil with foil tape, and then I painted it. So this is on the opposite wall as this sunset scene. So it's like we have like this like a squared off like sunset. It also has like this 8x10 like relation to the human body, and then we have this like this bigger circular sunset. It's a circle, and also it's like related to the human body. That I measured. And then the other piece which I didn't do the image of was I taped my shoe to the floor and then just like stretched my entire body and made an outline in the shot. So so this is the work that's up at Sophie and Jacob, and there's more circles involved. And so these drawings are I also titled Unknown Patterns, and so most of them have like some sense of like generic landscape to them, and then like I made like a sort of piece of land on the bottom or something similar to that, and some sort of celestial body at the top, and then like I guess like the most interesting the most interesting part of the piece was I asked 11 other artists to make frames for all the drawings. So there was no hard rules that I stuck to absolutely, but I basically didn't show the drawings to anyone, and just told them that they had a 12-inch by 12-inch square, like internal diameter for the frame, and then the rest of it was up to them as far as materials or how big the outer dimension was. So this is the first one I did, and it was the first drawing I did on this like circular wax paper, and I used wax crayons on it, so it was supposed to be sort of like wax on wax, and that was what the whole series was going to be, but then I sort of like let that go, and used paint and other things. And then I made this frame as well, so this is sort of like if no one else had been involved, right? Like if there hadn't been sort of like as the unknown of like collaborating with someone else. This is my friend John. Well, all these people are my friends. So John made this, and he asked Jordan, Steve, and David for pairs of pants, and then we shredded them and cast them in paraffin wax. And then he has these strings with pins that you can kind of like pin into different parts of the wall. This idea of like the frame is like a gallery, and then it kind of extends out. In the way that you would like locate something on a map and like put pins to certain. So he was kind of playing off of that as the gallery or the way that the gallery connects people like spreads out beyond the confines of the walls. This is cast in paper pulp. Jesse made this, and super delicate, super time consuming, just really, really amazing. I was kind of thinking while I was getting these frames from people, like I just hope I do them justice, because there's way more time put into making the frames and making the drawings. And that brings up an idea of, so normally the frame is supports the drawing, and I think with this series it's the other way around. Like the drawing supports the frame, which is like the real like object, the real like piece of interest. But the fact that there's a drawing in there justifies the fact that the frame can exist. So Joe made this, and he actually looked up on YouTube how to make a frame, because he'd never made one before. And they said, oh, you cut these pieces and you stick dowels through them, and then you glue it, and you put rubber bands around it. And so he did exactly what they said, and then when I picked it up from him, I said, is this just drawing? He was like, kind of, but like, I also think it would be cool if you just left rubber bands on there. So I did, and then like the instructions that I kind of handed out to people, I glued on the back of his. So this is like the didactic piece. This is the prompt that I gave everybody involved, and this is like, if you wanted to know just the most basic way how to make a frame, this is how you do it. Josh made this. This is, yeah, it's just really simple. Some of these drawings were already made and some of them I made after, and some of them I just put together and just thought, oh, that drawing goes well with that frame. That was one of them. Magnolia made this. Cool. Marianne made this. So like the bright white lines going across are just the fluorescent lights. I don't know, I kind of like it. It's not actually part of the drawing. Rob made this. He didn't know that that all the drawings were going to be round. He just kind of like on his own initiative did a round drywall. And this is actually a piece of linoleum for my kitchen floor that I had spray painted something else on. And it just kind of looked cool, so I just like peeled it off the floor and put it in the frame. This is Seth. So this frame is, like all these images are kind of sized down, but this is actually pretty big, like all the circles are the same size. And this plaque at the bottom is engraved, and it says the color of Primus's penis. Tim made this. It's huge. It's really, really big. We just leaned it up against the wall. Tony made this. He found this like super awesome foam core picture and put a whole lot of it. So this is definitely one like I made the drawings like more in response to the frame. Colin made this. He didn't have any way to attach the wood together, so he had 4 pieces of wood and he just put plastic over all to hold them together. So then this is an image of a couple pieces that sort of became one. The piece on the bottom right is, so it's like a portable water pool, and it's a piece of rubber, and I brought it into the gallery the day before the opening, and told Steve and David and Jordan, like, hey, I want to like grab a bunch of stuff in like the basement and put it around and then stick this piece of rubber in it and make a hole that we could pour water into. I'm thinking that like you could take this piece of rubber anywhere, so you could go do the hole outside, and you could go grab some rocks and make like a fire pit and stick it inside, and you could just have a pool wherever you wanted to. And this went through like several different versions, and like I had a really good time working on it. We kind of like half flooded the basement, and like now we like basically got it right, even though it needs to like have weekly maintenance done to it. But like I still like the idea, and I still think it's rad that we got a pool of water in the floor. So this is the staircase that goes down into the basement. You can see that the door to the basement is on the far right. And then this table is made out of wax, and this is what it looks like when it's not melted. And then there's a pot underneath. This is generally like a type of pot that's used to either heat water or wax. And in this case, it's full of water. And it heats up and it steams, so you can see the condensation under the table, and you can see that the steel is starting to oxidize. And then it melts this pool in the middle. So like most of the wax stays solid, and then this little pool turns to liquid, and it just like hangs out there. So one thing that was written about in the press release for the show was materials on the brink of transformation. And I like this idea that the wax is wax regardless of whether it's solid or liquid, but it behaves completely differently. It has very different properties depending on what temperature it is. And so this corresponds to that map that's directly behind it. So this is a map that the city, Baltimore City, gave to occupy Baltimore back maybe in November, and it basically said you can kind of read their. Oh wait, this is their version. So it says like in the middle, occupy Baltimore tents and set up area, and then it says no setup, no setup, no setup, no setup. And this idea of kind of like sectioning off like where people can be, right? So I guess this responds to, or interacts with both the water piece and the wax piece, and like the circle is like, well, this is like this area in some way like holds water, right? It holds this potential energy. And it's also like this area that's sort of like more activated. So so there's like this heat underneath the surface, right? And that's like kind of changing the state of the wax above it. And I think for me personally, it's just this idea of like claiming the city as your own, and just sort of saying like people have a right to the city in one way or another, and like there might be a tension there, and that needs to get worked out somewhere. So this is the last piece. This is what I'm going to finish up with. This is another document that Baltimore City gave to occupy, and this, you can see it comes from the Department of Recreation and Parks. Sort of see that? And it basically is denying any sort of park permit to stay there overnight. And so it's this long list of like, you know, we're unable to approve the applications for reasons stated in this letter, this blah, blah, blah. And so it just lists all these things. So it's just like, this is what you're doing wrong, 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 wrong. And then there's this one line, I don't know if you can read it, and it says, permitted activities under park rules are allowed only between 8 a.m. and 11 p.m. You contemplate activities 24 hours a day. And when I read that, I was like, yeah, that's awesome, they get it. Like and I just feel like that was the one compliment in the entire document. So I redacted everything else. So that's all it says. And that's it. That's how that's end on that. So, yeah. Does anybody have any questions? Yep.
Well, I wonder if, so in your whole presentation, I wonder if you feel like the work that you were making, or I mean, towards the end of the presentation and everything, came out of like a curiosity in your relation to not just like a space or like a city, but like almost an obligation towards like a city, like this city to respond to like things that you see. I mean, then maybe that sounds like obvious or something, but I'm curious about like, you know, you made a lot of that kind of like investigates your relation to like the space that like balance like or an object that you might see on like as you pass by like the sort of like price and things. But I wonder if eventually like curiosity or like investigation became almost more like civic duty or something, especially with this work that you're showing us.
Yeah, I think definitely. So I guess yeah, I was also just thinking through like how all materials and all spaces are inherently political. And they only like seem like they're not when like people do what they're supposed to, right? So when there's like no tension at all. But when people feel like they're owed more, or I mean, I guess that's kind of thinking of these more recent pieces. But even just like the stuff we throw away, and like the like delicate treatment of like the little player pieces on the table. Yeah, I think that maybe it's like a way to like try to heighten like a certain awareness to like all the complicity that that goes on is as far as just like, you know, everything we do is like is sort of like packed with meaning, and so like sort of trying to like, I don't know, maybe unpack it, or like just do like something, just like play with the materials a little bit and see like like anything comes out of it that's helpful. Anything else?
I had a quick question just about the article in the city paper about the blue piece that is the pool that can be moved around. In the article, the writer, Beth, talks about it in a way that maybe I've never heard you discuss that piece. Wondering how you kind of feel about that kind of interpretation, either that one specifically or those kind of.
You said the water piece?
Yes.
Yeah, so, right, I remember him saying, like, that maybe it was a half-built swimming pool, like people ran out of funding, or maybe they had to move out of their house. Like, I hadn't thought about that. I mean, he mentioned a couple things that I had never thought of, but like, it was definitely an interesting take, and I think that's one. I mean, just the idea of, like, wanting to have some sort of, like portable water pool that you can take with you. It's sort of like a survival technique. And so, so yeah, I do, like, there is like this sense of crisis that, like, yeah, somebody got asked to leave or something went wrong, or yeah, it's just like an unusual way, like either there's like a certain transience or journey involved, or like, or it's like left over in some way. So yeah, I feel like it was just like entirely basic and abstract, but I guess vague and fitting. Sure. All right, thanks.